Hello, everyone. So it's great to have everyone here at the second True webinar. My name is Deepak Gupta, and I'm the student coordinator for True Orientation. So the reason why we want to host this webinar is that we wanted to give you guys both an overview of what orientation will be like, and at the same time, we wanted to give you guys the opportunity to talk to us so you can hear a little bit more about what our experiences at Brown were coming in as both transfers and RUE students. And so we really wanted to give you guys the opportunity to be able to better understand what exactly life is like at Brown, even though, of course, it's going to look a little bit different this next year. So next, we're going to go into introductions and just an overview of who is going to be joining us for the panel today. So I'm going to be moderating the panel, and just to give a brief introduction of myself, my name is Deepak. I'm currently a rising junior. I'm a transfer student who came in the fall of 2019 from Georgetown University, and I am the student coordinator for True Orientation. So then next, we're just going to go down the line into the other coordinators as well. So Zena.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I just want to say I'm so happy and excited to welcome you to join the True community. My name is Zena. I transferred from the University of Oregon last spring. I'm a rising junior and I am a peer coordinator.
Hi everyone, my name is Deborah Meyerowitz and I'm a rising junior. I entered Brown as a sophomore mid-year transfer in January 2020 and I transferred from the University of Maryland. I'm the coordinator for academic success. Welcome to True.
Welcome to Brown. I'm Ariana Jones-Allen. I am the RUSA president coming in this year of 2020. I am a RUE student, but also a transfer from community college in NYC. My class is 2020, and I will be a rising sophomore this year.
Am I good? All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Amory. I am a mid-year transfer from Brandeis University. I transferred in spring of 2019, and my position is a peer leader coordinator.
Hi everyone, my name is Callie. I'm a rising senior. I transferred last fall as a junior from Washington University in St. Louis. And my position is coordinator for digital engagement.
Hi everyone, my name is Renita. I'm really excited to have you guys all here today. I am a RUE student. I transferred from SUNY Orange in New York, and in this position, I am the coordinator for community engagement.
We have Avery in here at the background just to answer any logistical questions in case some of them come up. So then we'll just go ahead and go to just the overall list of orientation or list of questions that we got prior to the webinar, and then we can possibly go into a live Q&A format if we have some time. So the first question on orientation was, what will be the orientation schedule? So just to answer this question first. So of course, orientation is we're still trying to figure some things out because obviously there is still some confusion with the university having just made their decision, but we are working to figure it out right now. So currently what we have planned is that it's going to be a 4-day experience from August 25th to August 28th. And we are going to have one True webinar every single week leading up to that period, so that we can give you guys a better chance to assimilate into Brown beforehand. But overall, we really are working to make sure that you guys are going to have the opportunity to interact with each other sometime beforehand. And so that segues into our next question is what we will be doing to help transfer strong community and meet a variety of people given the circumstances. So we currently are actively working to pair you guys with peer leaders that you'll be able to meet during your orientation. And at the same time, we are going to have people who one of us will be in contact with you sometime before that period, just so you have somebody to talk to in case you have any questions about, let's say, choosing a dining hall plan, trying to get pre-registration figured out since it's happening before orientation this year. So we really are working to ensure that the transition is as smooth and easy as possible. So then next, talking about the transition into Brown. So now I wanted to open up to the coordinators, to you all, and ask you guys a few questions. So just among you guys, what were the easiest and hardest parts of transitioning into Brown?
I think what I felt like was the easiest is being part of the transfer community. Like I felt like immediately when I got to Brown, I had this small sub community within the school that I felt like I was really part of. And I had really strong bonds with the people in it, which was really nice. But I think on the flip side, I loved the transfer community, but I felt like it was really difficult sometimes to reach outside of the transfer community. Like I think as a transfer, you have to make a really active effort to get outside of the transfer community. Like you have to kind of take the initiative on that yourself.
To piggyback off of what Callie said, I did have a very similar experience. I really enjoyed going to all the transfer events and the resumed undergraduate education students events, and I found that that community was so strong that I was able to feel more comfortable at Brown. However, I did try to venture out of that community as well, and I found it extremely easy at Brown due to the kindness of students. During shopping period, you attend a lot of different courses, and when you sit down, you just say hi to someone next to you, and many of those students are just so welcoming and so excited to hear about your experiences, because we do have different experiences as true students. So, I would definitely recommend, and which this is what helped me, is every single time you go to a class, make a new friend, talk to someone next to you, even get their phone number if you're thinking of staying in the course. And then I would definitely recommend going to the activities fair. That was another way that really helped me reach out past the transfer community and really gave me, an outlet in terms of extracurriculars during the week. So definitely the activities fair made my transition much easier. And when you do go to those activities, again, talk to people, get people's phone numbers, make sure to go to those community-oriented events, and then you could definitely find those networks of people who you relate to.
So I think there's a lot of great opportunities to join clubs and activities at Brown. But I do think it's okay to just sort of take your time and, be really certain about the activities that you want to join and find something you really like and can be invested in. It's not necessary to just join a bunch of different activities that you may not really enjoy right away. Like you can sort of take your time and you will definitely find people that you connect with.
Yeah, and quickly piggybacking off what Deborah was saying earlier, there's a key phrase you have to learn if you're going to meet people at Brown, which is "let's grab a meal." That's constantly, I hear it all the time. I don't know if it's not, obviously not just at Brown, but I feel like it's a very frequently used phrase that's just always like, oh, whenever you meet somebody new, just throw that in there. It helps, I think it helps a lot in terms of just meeting people, like going to meals together or just having those opportunities for interaction outside the classroom. I think I think transitioning into Brown is hard, I think, a little bit on the logistical sense, just trying to figure out what campus is like and everything. But for me, I would say the easiest part was definitely the social aspects, because I think Brown's community is a very, very open community, which is something I was very surprised to experience. I was happy to experience that at the beginning. And so, yeah, it was really, really great being able to meet so many different types of people who were both transfer and not even transfer, who wanted to learn more about my experiences.
I found that the city was a travelable city, that you were able to travel out if you wanted to get away for a minute and take a breather. We're able to use the bus with our ID to get on, and it's free. There's also a downtown if you wanted to go to the mall, or if you and friends wanted to be off campus for a minute, or just get around and see other parts like Wayland Square and Wicked Inn. There's also some cool places around campus to go and grab some coffee or some bakery and some pastries and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I want to take us briefly into our next question. So this one's a little bit simpler, but just how was it making friends?
I think it was cool. I think you find people that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but once class starts and you get that common bond of starting to having to do the work and having to figure out, study groups and how projects are going to have to be done, it makes getting closer easier. But the first couple of days, I think everyone's nervous. Not sure. Shopping period makes it a little difficult, I find, because people are pumping in and out. And so you really don't see the same people, or those people may move quickly. But once the class settles in to their regular schedule, then you start to make those bonds and groups. And definitely by midterm, when you need a study buddy, you will find your people.
I always felt like I was a person who had difficulty making friends because I'm a little bit shyer, more reserved. But at Brown, I found it super easy because of the amount of opportunities and the amount of resources that were given to us. You know, I mentioned the extracurricular activity fair. So, you know, when you go to these fairs, you also meet people. You don't necessarily, as Amory said, you don't necessarily have to commit to any club. You don't have to put your name down. You can just walk around and talk to people and make friends that way. And, you know, I just found people in general at Brown to be extremely welcoming and super kind. For instance, Chi Omega currently, and I rushed my first semester, and I met so many friends that way who, you know, friends who aren't even in my sorority, and we're still in touch today. You know, we met through the rush process, and that's not to say you have to do something like joining Greek life or joining a club to make friends. It's just as simple as saying hi to the person next to you in class, as I had said before. But if you do want those opportunities like Greek life or any other extracurricular community-oriented club, they're available at Brown.
I totally agree with what Deborah was saying. I felt like the summer going into the year that I transferred to Brown, I was so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make any friends at this school because I'm a transfer. It's going to be so hard for me. And I actually felt like it was honestly easier to make friends at Brown than it was in my prior institution. I think in part because of the transfer process. And I felt like everyone was kind of on the same page going into Brown and was so just willing and open to make friends that I felt like it happened so easily and so naturally. And I think that was probably my biggest concern going into Brown. And looking back on it, like, I don't even know why I was so concerned because it happened so easily.
Yeah, I have one small tip just to add to what Callie said. I totally agree with the points everyone else has made. From my personal experience, in my first few weeks at Brown, I was very nervous. I didn't really want people to know I was a transfer. I just wanted to blend in like all the quote unquote normal students. And I realized that was actually like really detrimental in making friends because people are really excited to meet like transfer, visiting, and RUE students. And so one of my biggest lines became, "Hi, I'm Zena, I'm a transfer." And I found that people were just a lot more open and welcoming if you tell them where you're coming from, and they'll be willing to help you out.
Yeah, ironically, Zena and I actually met at just a random true pizza party that was being held for the spring transfers because he's a spring transfer. And so we just randomly started talking. And yeah, from then we've like known each other like this entire past semester. And even though circumstances of life obviously changed, we've still kept in touch. I also wanted to follow up. So looking at your experiences for both Renita and Ariana, I wanted to ask you guys as RUE students, how did you feel, like what do you think your experiences were in integrating into the Brown community? Did you think it was harder being a RUE student, or what nuances do you think there were being a RUE student?
I think the community of RUE is amazing. I think we're a strong group of people to pull resources and support off of. My experience, I just had to explain what RUE was, which was great because a lot of people didn't know what a RUE student was. And so I was able to show a different aspect of what Brown has to offer to everyone in the community. And a lot of people are really positive about that, my experience being a student coming back after so many years. So that was really great. And just kind of asking me questions, and I asked them questions, and it was just a really open dialogue, and it gave an opportunity to have people learn something that they didn't necessarily if you were a traditional age student.
Yeah, for me, I actually feel very similar to what Zena said. When I first came to Brown, I was like, I'm just going to blend in. Like no one needs to like, I just want to be a normal student. But like I found when I said like I'm a RUE student, I'm in a non-traditional program and I transferred here, people got super excited, or especially like if I was ever lost, then they'd be like, oh, are you new? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a transfer. And people would get so excited and literally walk me across campus out of their way because they're so happy to have other students. So yeah, I found once I started like telling other students a bit about my background, they were very open to it and very welcoming.
Yeah, just to summarize this question and close it off, I definitely, like I said this in the webinar last week, and I still think this is true. I definitely think that the true community at Brown is one of the best ones that exists at Brown, because it's such it's the perfect size group of people to where, you know, you have the opportunity to meet different types of people, but you don't feel like you're spending too much time with the same people. And at the same time, you have the opportunity to meet people with such cool experiences who come from all different types of backgrounds. And yet everybody in some way, shape, or form has been led to Brown. So I think the true community has always been one of the best parts about Brown. And it's really comforting for me to be able to know that the Brown administration actively works to incorporate TRUE into the Brown community. We don't we're not in our own sequestered part. I feel like both the administrators and the normal Brown community themselves, they all really are invested in what our experiences were. They really care about us. So I definitely think that being a TRUE student at Brown is something to be very, very proud of. So then going into the next question, what resources helped you get adjusted into Brown?
For me, it was the deans for RUE students. And if you're coming in as a first year RUE student, you get an advisor to speak with. And so that was helpful. Also for RUE, we have Dean Bhattacharya and Avery now. And that's really helpful that you can go and speak with someone. I also, because my first year advisor was Dean Cohey, and she was part of the Women's and Gender Society Club, it was easy to be a part of that group and to feel welcome and also to ask questions. I think with Brown, no one will ever not answer your question. And that's the great thing. Like if you have a question, no question is big or small. If they don't know it, they will literally walk you to the person that can help you. And that's really comforting because you're able to find in yourself that you ask more questions and no question is stupid, and they are able to help you.
I think the biggest resource for me, I never really had much involvement with the administration or sort of formal orientation activities, but I would say the biggest resource was the other students at Brown, especially students that did not transfer and came in a more traditional route during the freshman year. Like everyone's been saying, they were just really welcoming and open and willing to answer any questions, even if I didn't really know them that well.
For me, I would say my biggest resource has definitely been peer leaders. You know, one of my biggest issues in transitioning into Brown was figuring out all the online platforms, because there are many, and figuring out, you know, my advising network, because there are a lot of advisors, whether it be the initial dean you're assigned to, or your concentration advisors. And, you know, I needed a lot of this stuff explained to me, and peer leaders are more than happy to do that. And we are going to be as well. So don't worry about, you know, not understanding the online platforms, because there truly are a lot. And don't worry about not knowing who exactly to go to in terms of administration, because we have that information and we will provide it for you. And just, you know, peer leaders in general have so much experience. They've been where you have been, and they want to help. They're so excited about this community, and that's why they applied, and that's why they're a peer leader. So, you know, definitely for me, peer leaders were the top of the chain. I mean, then it comes down, and, you know, deans will be extremely helpful. And so are concentration advisors, especially when you're talking about transfer credits, which I know there's a question coming up about transfer credits, and I'm sure we'll respond to that very soon. But yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. Definitely start with your peer leaders. If your peer leaders can't answer it, go to a dean. And then, you know, if it's concentration specific or about credits, what have you, concentration advisors, you know, we have career lab, we have all different types of, you know, we have pre-med advisors, we have pre-law advisors, every single advisor under the sun, and you can create your network with the help of your peer leaders.
One story I always like telling about my peer leader is that I was looking at classes to take for the fall, and I literally had no idea what courses to take, like no idea what a computer science concentrator should be taking. So I texted my peer leader, who was also a computer science concentrator, and I was just like, I have no idea what to take. And he immediately called me and spent like 30 minutes on the phone with me, helping me figure out every single class I wanted to take. So your peer leaders will really be there to help you.
Yeah, definitely. I think quickly contributing something. So I think there's definitely, like Deborah was saying, there's no shortage of support resources on campus. I can assure you guys that, like, any type of resource or support that you need, you'll be able to find it. I think it's just a matter of figuring out which system works for you the best. So for me personally, I know that, like, obviously my peer leader was such a great help in trying to figure out pre-registration and trying to figure out, you know, like the unconventional things about campus that might be helpful to know. And then I know for any logistical issues that I had relating to transfer credits and everything, I relied a lot on Dean Lee, who was, I know that she led my cohort's orientation in fall 2019. And so she was really a huge resource, and she was super, super kind, like so willing to meet with anybody who came to her office. So again, even though there are so many resources out there, just be willing to try a few of them out and see which ones work the best for you. Because honestly, with how many there are, it goes on a case-by-case basis. And I think Brown really can offer everybody some sort of tailored advising experience. All right, so then going on to the next question. So now we're going to turn it over to academics a little bit. So obviously, in terms of academics, the TRUE community really has a lot of diversity because you have so many people coming from community college, 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions, and some students are RUE students, meaning that they're coming back and finishing their degree, or they're starting a degree after a while. So I wanted to ask you guys, compared to your old school, or compared to your expectations before Brown, did you feel like Brown's academics were harder or easier?
I think that's a pretty tricky question to answer because it really depends, you know, on who you are and what concentration you're focusing in, or what concentration you are in. For me, I found they were much more difficult because I used transferring to Brown as an opportunity to explore a subject that I didn't have a lot of background with. So at my previous institution, I studied international relations, political science. And when I came to Brown, I switched to applied mathematics and visual art, which were things that I didn't have a lot of background in at the time. So they can be more difficult depending on the route you take, but like everyone's been saying, there's a lot of advisors, a lot of resources, a lot of tutoring opportunities, and I would really try and see it as an opportunity to push yourself.
One of my biggest fears when transferring to Brown was that I was at a large state school before, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm transferring to an Ivy. Like, I don't think I can do this level of work. And that was a really big insecurity of mine before transferring and in my first few weeks of transferring. But really, I came to the conclusion that I think transfers can do the work just as the level of all the other students. If you got into Brown as a transfer, you are certainly good enough to be here, and I'm sure you will excel, and we're all happy to support you along that journey.
I second what Zena had said. You know, I also came from a large state school. I came from the University of Maryland, and I felt the same way. I didn't know if I would be able to keep up the same level of academic success that I had back at my state school, and I was concerned because of, you know, the Ivy League status and the level of academics at Brown. However, I found the level to be just as difficult, you know, if not easier at times, because a lot of professors were willing to talk to me, as opposed to at a large state school where, you know, professors were more, you know, I'm going to lecture and then that's it. At Brown, you know, you can go to extra help, you know, you can go to their office hours to get some extra help anytime you want to. They're, you know, they usually have at least once a week. And then, you know, if you're in a class with TAs, they have office hours as well. So, you know, I definitely found it to be the same level of academic rigor. Now, that's not to say that, you know, there aren't other, I'm an international and public affairs concentrator, and that's not to say that there aren't other concentrations where it might be slightly more difficult or even easier. But in my experience coming from a state school, it's been the same level of academic rigor.
Yeah, just to jump in, I definitely agree with what other people have said. Like, no one's going to say Brown isn't challenging. I've definitely been challenged here, but it's also an amazing opportunity to be surrounded by a body of students that is passionate about what they're learning and excited to be learning it. And that kind of continued to motivate me. So I take like a lot, like when I was taking Orgo or like physics, which I don't love and are challenging, but I have to get through. It helps to have peers that are very eager to work hard and do well, and you can work hard with them. And also the professors are very willing to work with students. If something comes up, you can communicate with your professor, and the Brown professors are amazing. So that helps.
Yeah, and also just quickly adding on to that, Brown also, the academic system that exists at Brown, like being able to take any classes pass fail, I found was a really, really big help in transitioning into Brown, because that first semester you're in a, it can be very, very stressful for some people, and you're still trying to figure out how exactly to integrate into the community. So having that option of pass fail, I know like I know that it's something that I know a lot of my friends took advantage of. I took advantage of the option as well, just trying to help balance the course load during that first semester. And so I think that even within Brown's academic systems, there are a lot of options that you have in order to be able to help you feel comfortable. I remember I took Introduction to Neuroscience my first semester because I was like, oh, maybe I'm pre-med. And then I was possibly the most miserable experience of my life all the way up until I want to say November or so, when I was like, okay, I went and spoke to Dean Lee. I was like, okay, I'm absolutely miserable in this class. Like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, oh, you know, you have the option to drop the class actually. And I'd known about dropping the class before, but it was weird to me because the institution where I came from, Georgetown, that was not something that was really an option. And so I was talking it over, and she was like, yeah, you know, there are no consequences to it. You can just drop the course. And so I ended up dropping Introduction to Neuroscience, the best decision I ever made. So again, you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to doing things like that at Brown that you don't have at other schools. I think that really helps with the academic transition. So then next, we're going to go into another question on academics. So do you guys have any advice for pre-registration or shopping period? I think just to start off talking about shopping period really quickly. So obviously it's going to work a little bit differently than it normally does, where people are in person walking through classes. It's going to be virtual. But at the same time, my advice would just be like shop as many courses as you can. Coming in, I was like, oh, you know, this shopping, you know, I don't really need the shopping period stuff. I have like my 4 to 5 courses that I know I'm going to take for this semester. But then, and that was during my first semester. But then during my second semester, when I felt more comfortable, I was like, okay, let me try out more of these random classes, like in American Studies, for example, or anthropology. And I ended up being really, really interested in those classes. And it was a really great experience for me, being able to step outside my comfort zone and actually try out these classes that I wasn't even, like, I had no idea I was even thinking of. I had no idea that they would be so interesting to me. So my biggest piece of advice for shopping period would be that really, like, embrace the shopping period, like go to 20 courses if you can, just like during that week. It's obviously a really busy time, but just try out as many random courses as you can, because you have absolutely no idea what you think you're going to want to take.
I have just a piece of what I would say is more concrete advice for pre-registration, which is it's a good opportunity to save yourself a seat in the classes that you're really interested in and really passionate about, because unfortunately some classes can be hard to get into. I can't speak to every subject, but like I said, one of my concentrations is visual art, and some art classes at Brown are extremely competitive to get into, especially the lower level intro art classes. So if any of you are considering taking an art class this semester, I would strongly recommend pre-registering for that class.
I kind of feel a little differently than Deepak does. I think you should definitely shop a lot of courses, but I think you have to be careful about not, overwhelming yourself with so many courses. And I know from experience, I shopped like I think 16 classes, and I was so overwhelmed, like running, literally sprinting from one class to the other. I was so anxious, I was so exhausted, I couldn't even keep track of, because they start assigning homework. They start, they give you readings to do, they give you actual homework that they might be grading, and if of course if you're not going to stay in the class and you don't do the homework, you won't be penalized. However, if you last minute decide that you want that class and you already missed a bunch of homeworks, you're going to have to talk to the professor about that, and it gets a little complicated. So for me, I would say definitely, shop a lot of courses, but, it depends on the person what a lot means to you. I think one of my peer leaders said, don't do more than 10. I did not follow that advice, and I paid. So I would definitely be interested to hear how many other coordinators have recommend, but I think definitely if I kept it under 10, it probably would have been better for me, and I would have been less stressed out. But again, to each his own, everyone's different. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I didn't shop a lot. My first semester, I had a walking boot on. So going in and out of courses wasn't a possibility. So I had to do a lot of my work online. And so I had to balance kind of what I was interested in with what I read online. And I did that as in how much work and how much reading was I going to have, and was it feasible to really balance a course that is saying that there's 5 papers, 60 pages per week to read, and I have to multiply that by 4. So I try to use the peer reviews online that we would see, talk to other peer leaders, coordinators, my community, to see how that worked, especially because I wasn't able to kind of do shopping period because I was in a walking boot.
Okay, I wouldn't say that this is the only way that you should pick your classes, but I also think that shopping period can be useful to like scout out who's in the classes. So like if you met someone during orientation that you really liked but didn't really get to see again, and then you go to shopping period and see that they're in one of your classes, that can maybe be like a motivation to stay in the class. Like hopefully not the only motivation, but I definitely think a lot of friendships can start at orientation and then really get cemented in classes. So that can be kind of useful to scout out during shopping period.
Yeah, I'll also say that shopping period at Brown, of course, it's going to look a little different this upcoming semester, but in a normal shopping period at Brown, I'm sure some of this energy might carry over, but professors really just understand that you can just they really embrace the idea of shopping period. And to give you guys a better sense of that, what that means. So in the fall semester, I remember my peer leader said to our group, saying that even if you walk into a class and you don't like it, you can just walk out in the middle of it and leave, no matter what size of it is. And I remember hearing that, I was like, what type of libelous, this is just so, outrageous. How could, that just seems so unconventional. But then I remember it happened all the time. The professors did not care. They were like, oh yeah, you're just here to be able to get a glimpse of our course. And after 5 minutes, you don't want to take it, then I can't expect you to sit through the rest of it. So I think and I'm sure that even though shopping period is going to look pretty different, there's still going to be that energy of professors know that you're going to be coming and going. Sometimes, you have a conversation with a professor and then, you can ghost the professor, if that makes sense. And they just don't really care. During that 2-week period, it's really, professors just understand that you're figuring out your academic experience and what you want for this upcoming semester. So they're very, very understanding. So next, we're going to go into a few questions about life at Brown, and then we'll turn it over to the live Q&A. So again, just a reminder, please, if you have any questions, literally anything at all, like anything about life at Brown, academics, orientation, just feel free to ask it in the chat and we'll be able to answer. So going into life at Brown, so this touches upon a little bit what we talked about earlier, but what was it like getting involved in extracurricular activities?
Yeah, so it really,
go ahead.
okay, cool. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would say it really took me like a long time to find an activity that I was interested in. But yeah, it's really easy to try lots of different clubs. Some do require applications, but I honestly found that even the clubs that do require applications allowed you to do like a kind of shadowing thing to see if you were even interested in applying. So that was really great. And yeah, I just finally, like, small plug, I finally found Car Team, which is sick. We build and drive a race car at a like Formula One style event every year. So little plug. You don't need to be an engineer. There's artists, there's chemists. Yeah, so everyone can get involved.
Yeah, I was going to also just touch on something Amory said earlier. Like my first semester, I thought I had to have this crazy extracurricular life. I like tried to get involved in 3 or 4 clubs and get potential leadership positions or make sure they aligned with my concentration, but I wasn't actually that interested in it. I was kind of doing it because everyone advised, like I had always heard, like you should be in a lot of extracurriculars. And then like I ended up finding kind of my second semester into my third like running club, which has nothing to do really with my academics, but I just really enjoy like going for a run with a bunch of Brown students that enjoy that too. So yeah, like you kind of find what fits over time. And if it doesn't click into place the first semester, don't worry, because it will. And yeah, don't just do what you think will look good on your resume, but do something that you're actually passionate about.
As you might be able to tell already, extracurriculars are some of, one of my favorite things at Brown overall, and I love talking about extracurriculars at Brown. I just think there's so many opportunities and there's a club for everyone. And, especially your first couple of weeks or even your first semester, don't feel pressure to, overcommit yourself to clubs or to attend, every single one you sign up for, or, that's not the way to engage in Brown. I would say the way to do it is to find a couple that you're super passionate about, and that's going to be where you find your people and you have the most enjoyment. And if you enjoy those the most, you'll probably stick with it throughout your semesters at Brown. Also, you can find a community. For instance, I found the theater community at Brown, and we're extremely interconnected. There are a lot of different clubs and a lot of different opportunities in the theater community, and you don't have to just stick to one. And you're not, it's not something where you must go to a meeting every single week. And there are a lot of clubs like that where you don't have to go to a meeting every single week. You can go to one, see if you like it, and even if you do like it, you can go sporadically. It's not nothing set in stone when it comes to extracurriculars. And again, if you're interested in extracurriculars at all, I would definitely recommend the activity fair because you meet a lot of great people there. You get to sign up for listservs, which is really helpful because even if you're not a part of a club, sometimes there are events where they have amazing speakers or, just a fun, community-oriented event that'll help introduce you to new people. So that's also an exciting way to get involved at Brown.
And also I think the extracurricular scene at Brown is really, really accessible because there's just so many, there's literally so many clubs, every single club you can possibly think of. And like, there's constantly clubs being made, constantly clubs like being dissolved, it's always, things are always changing. The scene is always changing. So just to also give a quick plug. So for this past semester, I started the Brown Public Speaking Initiative. If you guys have been paying attention to the Day at Brown, to the Today at Brown newsletter, you'll be able to see some of our events. But I just started that because I was talking with a few friends, and we were thinking, because I had been involved with Model UN this past semester, and I was thinking I really want there to be a club that focuses on practicing public speaking. And so I was talking with a few friends, and we're like, okay, yeah, let's make this happen. And so the club approval process is very, very accessible. Like if you go into the club database at Brown, which is bearsync.org, you'll be able to see a lot of the wide variety of different clubs. Some of them are conventional, some of them are not so conventional. So there's definitely going to be something there for you. There's going to be something there for you to be interested in. So then I think that'll take us to our final question before we go into the live Q&A, but what are the best dining halls at Brown? And I want to hear from all of you guys because I'm curious to hear about what your guys' thoughts are.
Definitely the Ivy Room. I'm not even a vegetarian, but there's food there that I would actually pay real money for. So I'm a big Ivy Room stan.
Okay, I would agree with that and say Ivy Room and Andrews have the best quality food, but I think that the Ratty, which is like the Sharper Factory, has the best quality experience. Like, I don't think you go for the food. I think you go for the vibes, you go for the experience. And I stand by that.
I totally agree with Callie. I think you go to the Ratty to see your friends, to meet new people. It's a great social experience.
As far as the food goes, I would say I like Andrew's the best, but I agree with what others people said that it's not necessarily as social as like the Ratty would be.
I agree. I think Andrews has the best food. The pho is pretty good. I like it a lot. But definitely the Ratty is definitely a convening space where a lot of people go. I really like the omelets. So yeah, I recommend those. Yeah, I also really enjoy the Blue Room. I don't know if that counts as a dining hall, but it's very centrally located, and they have a lot of good meals. And I don't know. I just think it's a good place to eat.
I guess I would say the Ratty. I don't do many dining halls because I'm off campus and off meal plan, but I do enjoy the salad bar, and then I can grab an ice cream cone, and the dessert bars. I have a sweet tooth, so it's kind of nice to have an opportunity to grab as many as I want.
Yeah, and I would say that for me, so I'm a huge fan of Andrews, that's on the north part of campus. And so just for a little bit of context in case you guys don't know, so the Ratty is, well, normally not under, COVID circumstances, normally the Ratty is like you swipe and then it's all you can eat style. Whereas with Andrews, it's you get a certain amount of food and you swipe for that. So with Andrews, I think personally the quality of food at Andrews is a little bit bougier, I guess. It's you have a lot of options like pizza, like pho, and I personally think they're really, really good, especially after a stressful day. And then I will also say Joe's. So Joe's, for those of you who don't know, it's I guess like I guess more of a late night dinery option because they open around 6 p.m. and they close around like midnight or so, and then they're open for a little bit longer on the weekends, I think. But they have a spicy with, that's a rite of passage for you guys. When you guys come to Brown, you have to be able to taste a spicy with. So that's just a spicy chicken sandwich with, I believe that's pretty much it. And then you just get some spicy mayo on it or something like that. But they also have options like salads. So there's definitely Brown's dining hall options are, in my opinion, they're doing pretty good. They're doing pretty good. So now we're going to go to the live Q&A. We're going to take a look at some of the questions that you guys have asked in the chat. So the first question is, how many of you / your friends are coming to campus this semester? So just speaking for myself, I know that I'm going to be coming to campus. And I think a majority of my friends are coming to campus. However, obviously, there are a few people I know who are going to be remote, but I know that we've obviously made pledges to stay in touch with each other. And I think it's going to be easier to stay in touch with people who are remote, given that classes are going to be operating over Zoom and things like that. So yeah, that's my response to that question. But I'd love to hear what the rest of the coordinator team has to say.
For RUE students, I can say, I think although we don't live on campus, the majority of us, I know most of us are planning to be in the Providence area. So which is an option for RUE students. So we'll still, I think, yeah, the most of the RUE students I know are planning to be off campus, but in Providence. And then I guess if there's smaller classes, they'll attend those in person.
Yeah, I'm coming back to campus. Pretty much all of my friends are coming back to campus, except for one of my friends who's international from London. And I know that another one of my friends who's international from Hong Kong was also debating coming back. So I think for the most part, everyone, like most people are coming back, but I definitely think the international population is going to be lower than in previous semesters.
Okay, perfect. And then going to our next question. So so the next question asks, well, actually the next two questions, I'll just loop them together. So they just ask about transfer credit evaluations and that type of stuff. When you find out more information about it. I believe that stuff is going to be best asked to Deans Lee and Bhattacharya. I'm sure they're probably a little bit busy right now, so they might be a bit behind, but I think that they should be coming out soon. Deborah, as our coordinator for academic success, do you have any contributions on that topic?
Yeah, they definitely should be coming out soon. Even for us, I remember, my transfer credit information didn't come out until like right at the beginning of the orientation. And you really don't, I mean, I understand how you would want it because I know I did at the time, but really it's not of use to you until then. And definitely with that, if you have any questions, like I would definitely set up a meeting with Dean Lee or Dean Bhattacharya. I know I had a lot of meetings with Dean Bhattacharya about my credits. Also, sometimes, so there's a cap at the amount of credits that they can take. So sometimes they take a bunch of credits and then they leave out some credits that they might have been able to take because they do transfer over, but there's a cap because you can't have more than like 15 outside of Brown. 15 credits to graduate from Brown. You need 30 credits in total, and then 15 of them have to be Brown credits. So you can only have 15 transfer credits. So, for example, for me, I had a class that I actually wanted because it would apply to one of my concentration. So I'm an international and public affairs concentrator and a theater and performing arts concentrator. And, I had a bunch of classes that would apply to the international and public affairs, but there was one that they didn't accept, but would have been accepted if I had, if there was enough space to accept it. So you can kind of like play around with that. So if there's like a credit, for example, where, it doesn't apply to your concentration, like there were a couple credits that didn't apply to my international and public affairs concentration, I removed those credits and then put in a credit that applied to my theater and performing arts concentration so that, I would be able to fulfill concentration requirements that way. Also, with Dean Bhattacharya and Dean Lee, they just are able to tell you, which credits transferred over, not within which concentration. So you have to email concentration advisors separately and discuss which might fulfill a concentration requirement. And that could be done as early as you want to do it. And except for the fact that you need to receive your concentration, the credits that transferred over from Dean Bhattacharya and Dean Lee first. And then what I would do would be to email your your prospective concentration advisors, or just one of them that seems like they're like the head advisor. You can, you'll look at it, you can look it up on the department website. And once you do that, you can just email them and they'll probably arrange a meeting for you, and they'll ask for the syllabi from each of the classes that you hope will serve as a concentration requirement. And that's all you have to do. So yeah, so definitely they should be coming soon. And when they do come, if you want to get started on thinking about concentration requirements, I would just email concentration advisors.
Yeah, of course. I know Avery is hard at work trying to get you guys paired with your academic advisors, but I believe that he should be sending you guys more communications soon because the transfer credit evaluation process is still going on. They're still tying up a few loose ends. So you guys will definitely be hearing about that shortly. And then, of course, in the lead up to orientation and during orientation itself, we're going to be talking a lot about the process of getting things evaluated, like Deborah was saying, trying to just navigate that process, applying transfer credits to concentrations. So I'm international relations and economics. Economics is really easy because it's very much cut and dry what counts and what doesn't count. International relations is much more complicated. So we'll be talking about the whole process. So it's that, like, you guys can sit tight for now because we're gonna be able to figure all that out. And then the final question just asks about getting involved with activities this fair, and about getting involved in activities this fall, given that the activities fair might not be like the circumstances with the activities fair are going to be looking a little bit different. So I can just quickly preface that I know that the activities fair is most likely going to be done in a virtual way, but speaking as a leader of a club myself, I know that we're still going to have open sessions where students can just come and talk with us and be able to express interest in our club. We're not just going to leave it to be like, oh, sign up on this interest form and leave it to a bunch of social media posts. We're still actively working to try to be able to encourage that in-person, or not in-person, but face-to-face engagement.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'm part of many groups, and this fall we're all planning on like continuing to do our work just in like a new and creative way. One example is that I'm involved in Bolt, and we lead a week-long orientation backpacking trip every fall for sophomores, transfers, and RUE students. And unfortunately, the backpacking trip is not happening, but right now the entire Bolt community is doing a ton of brainstorming and planning about how we can still do relationship building and mentoring, and creating really intentional and welcoming communities, and specifically for transfer and RUE students. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so I second what Zena has said. Most clubs will be doing online events. I know like the theater community is definitely, is going to go on because, as we always do, the show must go on, and we'll mostly be online, for instance. And, I'm also very involved with Hillel, and we'll definitely be doing a lot of events. Probably will be some online Shabbats. And as I get updates, I will definitely let people know if they'd like to know. Also with at the activities fair, before the activities fair, which from what Deepak says, it sounds like it will be online. You can look at OrgSync and read about all the different organizations, and that way you can kind of get a feel for what you'd be interested in before the activities fair, that I guess will be a non-traditional fair, but fair nonetheless. Okay.
The one other thing I would add is check the Today at Brown emails, because often if a club is having like the first meeting of the year or something like that, or like welcoming new members, they'll put it on there. And I found out about a couple really awesome clubs through that. So just check that regularly if you're looking for opportunities.
Okay, perfect. And then really quickly, so we did get one more question. I'm going to quickly answer it and then we'll go into our closeout. But it just asks about, do you have any advice on getting involved with research since interactions with professors may be limited this semester? So the biggest piece of advice I can give you guys coming in as new students is there is a website called Research at Brown, or I believe it's Research at Brown or Researchers at Brown. And if you Google it and just look it up, you'll be able to see just the database of different professors who have publications out there on a wide variety of different subjects. It includes both STEM and humanities. And I have a really close friend who the biggest piece of advice that she gave me in terms of trying to get involved with researchers was just cold emailing people, because obviously if interactions are going to be limited, it might be a little bit harder to get in touch with professors, but just cold emailing, I think, is the most tried and true way to be able to make some connections, especially with this upcoming semester. So, and even in the time before, I think if you want to get involved with research for this upcoming semester, you should take advantage of this next month or so while professors aren't receiving a ton of communications from students. Just look through the database, see if you're interested in anybody's research or their topics of interest, and just shoot them an email, letting them know a little bit about yourself. Also, I highly recommend mentioning that you are a transfer or a RUE student, because professors, like, they're absolutely, like, it makes them 10 times more accommodating to your circumstances, because surprisingly, a lot of professors that I've talked to, when I mentioned that I'm a transfer, they were like, oh, I'm a transfer for myself, I went from this school to this school back in the day. And so I just highly recommend you always, pull the true card. It always ends up working out somehow.
Do we have time for me to add on to that for like a second?
Yeah, you can quickly add on, and then we'll go into
Yeah.
the closing.
So I understand because of distance learning, there might be some concerns about getting hands-on research experience, but the reality is that most practical experiments done in laboratories are precipitated by extensive theoretical research. So I research in 2 labs, and both are hands-on engineering labs. But right now, because there's so much distancing going on, all the undergraduates are doing theoretical background research and literature reviews to work towards bigger projects once things open up. So there's definitely opportunities to research even now. You might just have to wait before you can actually like get in there with building something.
Okay, perfect. So now, unfortunately, we do have to close out. It's nearing around 6 o'clock, but I wanted to thank all of you so much for attending this panel. Obviously, we understand that the circumstances this next semester are going to be different. And at the same time, being a transfer or resumed undergraduate education student, might be a little bit nervous about integrating, but I can assure you that as your orientation coordinators, we really are working to make sure that we're able to answer all of your questions at the same time, that you guys are going to have a seamless transition into Brown. So we're really we can assure you guys that we're doing our best to make sure that you guys have the best experience you possibly can. Really quickly, I also wanted to turn to Callie to plug our social media accounts. So Callie, do you want to quickly talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so just very quickly, we have a Facebook group, and we're going to use that, I think, as a chance for you guys to maybe like introduce yourself, like see other people that are also transferring your semester. And then we also have an Instagram, which we use for event announcements. We're going to introduce the peer leaders there. We're also going to do a couple giveaways, I think, before the semester starts. So I'm going to put the links to both in the chat. So there's the Facebook, and then here's the Instagram. And I would definitely recommend checking out both.
And of course, if you have any if you have any questions at all after this webinar, would like to speak with any of us at all, just please feel free to like shoot us an email or anything. Like, we're always available for one-on-one chats. You'll definitely be hearing from us soon, and we're working on getting you guys assigned your peer leader. So there's a lot that works behind the scenes, but I can assure you guys it's all going to work out in the end. So again, one final thank you to all of you for showing up. And again, a thank you to the coordinators for again participating in this panel. And yeah, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.